Love's Trials and Triumphs, Rebuilding Trust and Finding Freedom. Duncan glared at Liberty before leaving the car and heading into the restaurant to lock up. Inside the car, he noticed Liberty looking distressed and pale, and he asked her what happened. Liberty explained that Jasmine called to say something had happened to her sister, Saren. Liberty's mind started to conjure up worrisome scenarios, like a bookshelf falling on Saren while she was tidying up the bookshop. Overwhelmed with fear, she began to cry, haunted by the memory of her parents' sudden death years ago. Duncan, concerned about Saren as she was his best friend's wife, advised Liberty to call Miss Socks. Calling Miss Socks will let her find out the truth before jumping to conclusions and shedding tears unnecessarily. Liberty's emotions continued to overwhelm her as she recalled the day she received the devastating news about her parents' passing. Duncan tried to comfort her, but Liberty couldn't help but fear the worst. Sonny, Liberty's young son, offered his mother a tissue and tried to console her, calling her Mom. Liberty appreciated the gesture but was still deeply anxious. She called Jasmine to inquire about Saren's situation and was relieved to hear that it was not as serious as she had feared. It turned out that Jasmine was referring to Mr. York, who happened to be Zachary, the heir of the wealthy York family, whose wife's identity had been the subject of gossip. Jasmine explained that Zachary had a press interview that they watched, and Saren appeared shocked and unresponsive like a puppet. Jasmine tried to snap her out of it but couldn't elicit any reaction. Liberty was stunned to learn that her brother-in-law was the heir of the wealthy York family, as they had never appeared particularly wealthy in their interactions. Liberty instructed Jasmine to offer Saren water and, if necessary, splash her with cold water to break her trance. Jasmine worried about Saren catching a cold, but Liberty insisted it was the only way to bring her back to her senses. Jasmine attempted various methods to awaken Saren but nothing worked until she resorted to loud noises, which finally brought her back to reality. Saren seemed to be heading to the York Corporation to confront Zachary about his deception. Concerned for Saren's safety, Jasmine chased after her on her e-bike, hoping nothing bad would happen. As Jasmine pursued Saren on the road, she fervently prayed for her best friend's safety. Serenity and Jasmine left the bookshop, and Liberty got a ride from Duncan to Wiltspoon School. It was quiet as school was still out, and the nearby shops were closed. Liberty noticed that her sister's bookshop was shut and tried calling Serenity, but she didn't answer due to being preoccupied with her thoughts about confronting Zachary. Unable to reach Serenity, Liberty called Jasmine, who was chasing Serenity on her e-bike. Jasmine explained that Saren is heading to York Corporation to confront Zachary and was in an agitated state. However, Jasmine's e-bike was losing speed as its battery was running out. Liberty decided to rush to York Corporation to support her sister, and Duncan drove her there. Meanwhile, Duncan warned Zachary about the situation, advising him to prepare for Serenity's possible anger. Zachary had tried to hide his identity from Serenity to avoid losing her, but now that she knew the truth, he was worried about her reaction. He rushed back to the office after receiving the warning from Duncan and considered calling Nana for help in resolving the situation. Anxious and uncertain, Zachary contemplated how Serenity would react to the revelation. Despite his initial hesitation, Zachary decided to face the situation head-on. He knew Serenity would be upset, but he was determined to apologize and win back her heart. He acknowledged that relying on Nana for help all the time was not a solution. Zachary realized he was not the only one who had deceived Serenity, his entire family had played a part in it. Meanwhile, the public was relatively indifferent to Zachary's interview, but the Hunts and Browns had strong reactions. John, from the Hunts family, was particularly infuriated by the revelation. He had a deep grudge against his cousins and used derogatory terms to refer to them. Zachary, who cherished Serenity dearly, was ready to defend her at any cost. Zachary planned to support his wife and also take legal action to reclaim his father-in-law's property from the Hunts. However, the family's financial situation was dire, and Chris, John's father, expressed concern about their financial struggles. John finally confessed to witnessing Zachary's interview and believed that their recent streak of bad luck was somehow connected to him. Confused, Chris asked for clarification, wondering if Serenity's husband had orchestrated their misfortunes. He was unsure how a mere employee like Zachary could have such influence over their lives. The situation had made the holiday season difficult for the Hunts family, with their businesses struggling and family members facing unemployment. Amidst the family tensions, old Mr. and Mrs. Hunt continued to burden their kin, seeking money for the holidays to compensate for the expenses incurred during old Mrs. Hunt's hospitalization. Eager to secure their retirement, the elderly couple did not hesitate to ask for financial support from the rest of the family. John approached his father, Chris, with shocking news: Serenity's husband was none other than the wealthy heir of the York family, worth billions. Chris was taken aback by the revelation and couldn't believe that his niece had married into such wealth. Determined to capitalize on Serenity's newfound status, Chris swiftly made plans to approach his parents for money. He believed they deserved a share of the wealth, even if their relationship with Serenity and Liberty was fractured. Unaware of the potential consequences, Serenity felt a desperate need to see Zachary immediately. She drove recklessly and ended up in a minor car accident. Anxious to leave the scene, Serenity offered the driver more than enough money to cover the damage before hurrying away to attend her urgent matter. Arriving at York Corporation, Serenity was met by surprised employees who had seen Zachary's interview. Even though she was known as the CEO's wife, the public revelation about Zachary being Mr. York had just taken place. In her haste, Serenity was mistaken for an intruder by the security guard but was quickly recognized. As Serenity searched for Zachary in the office building, the receptionist provided her with the truth: Zachary was absent from the office that day. Serenity couldn't believe her ears when the receptionist informed her that Zachary was not in the office that day. Confused and angry, she questioned why he wasn't there. Memories of his recent interview flooded her mind, and she realized that the luxurious background of the interview was not familiar to her. Zachary had kept his real office hidden from her, claiming that everyone worked in cubicles. Feeling deceived and furious at the whole situation, Serenity demanded to see Josh, the CEO's administrative executive, who was supposedly helping Zachary thrive in the company. However, she knew the truth: it was the other way around. Josh was well aware of Zachary's marriage and the lies he had been telling Serenity. The receptionist made arrangements for Serenity to meet Josh, who was taken aback by her sudden appearance. She was escorted to Josh's office, where he greeted her respectfully. Sensing her anger, he prepared himself for the confrontation. As the tension built, Serenity had no idea that Josh had planned to skip work to deliver flowers to Jasmine. However, fate had different plans, as Serenity herself arrived at York Corporation, seeking answers and accountability from Zachary's family. Jasmine had called Josh for help as her e-bike ran out of battery. This was the first time she sought his assistance instead of her brother's, showing her concern for her best friend, Serenity. Meanwhile, Josh paused his plan to pick up Jasmine as Serenity arrived at the office. She questioned Josh about Zachary's true identity and his connection to the wealthiest family in the city. Josh carefully observed Serenity's emotions, realizing she had seen the interview where Zachary pretended to be an ordinary salaryman. He knew that Serenity held a special place in Zachary's heart and divorce was not an option for him. Finally, Josh confirmed the truth to Serenity, admitting that Zachary was indeed Mr. York, the heir of the wealthy York family and the CEO of York Corporation. Serenity's world shattered as she realized the depth of Zachary's deception. Although Josh wanted to see Zachary suffer for his lies, he also stood up for his best friend and offered an explanation for Zachary's actions. He hoped to prevent a divorce and the potential catastrophic consequences for both Zachary and York Corporation. As the truth sunk in, Serenity felt betrayed and hurt. She couldn't believe Zachary had fooled her for so long, and she recalled how she had once helped another woman, Elisa, who happens to be her cousin, to win Zachary's heart. Serenity was devastated by the revelation. Josh understood that Serenity was not interested in social status or climbing the social ladder, all she wanted was honesty from Zachary. He knew Zachary's love for Serenity was genuine, but the damage caused by his lies would not be easily repaired. Despite the reasons for Zachary's deception, Josh assured Serenity that his feelings for her were genuine. Overwhelmed with emotions, Serenity thanked Josh and decided to leave the office building immediately, not wanting to spend another moment there. Josh accompanied Serenity downstairs, offering her words of advice to give Zachary a chance to explain. However, Serenity remained silent, her facial expressions revealing her anger and shock. Outside the building, Callum, Zachary's brother, awaited Serenity to prevent her from leaving until Zachary arrived. He feared that she might walk out of Zachary's life forever. Seeing Callum and the York family only fueled Serenity's anger, and she tried to storm past him. Callum, torn between his loyalty to his brother and his responsibility to stop Serenity, hesitated. He attempted to hold her back, but she resisted, demanding he move out of her way. When Serenity attempted to leave, Callum blocked her path once more. Frustrated and upset, Serenity threw punches at Callum in her attempt to escape. The onlookers watched the altercation without intervening. Josh, who was on his way to pick up Jasmine, heard about the fight and rushed to the scene. He and Callum managed to restrain Serenity despite her self-defense skills. Despite her outburst, they were determined not to let her leave until Zachary arrived. Duncan drove Liberty to York Corporation, and on their way, they encountered Jasmine, whose e-bike had run out of battery. Jasmine joined them in the car, leaving her bike by the roadside. As they reached the office building, Liberty and Jasmine hurriedly approached Serenity, who seemed distressed and upset. Meanwhile, Duncan, had Sunny in his arms, finally had the chance to hug him. Serenity was overwhelmed by her emotions and found comfort in her sister Liberty's arms. Tearfully, she expressed her desire to go home, but not to Zachary's home. Liberty lovingly agreed, and the two sisters decided to leave. Jasmine offered to hold Sunny to give Liberty and Serenity a chance to talk. Callum, however, intervened, reminding Liberty that Zachary was on his way to the office and urged them to talk things out. Liberty firmly asserted that Serenity didn't want to speak with Zachary at the moment and requested Callum to step aside. Despite Callum's concern, Liberty led Serenity around, attempting to leave. Callum was concerned about holding Serenity there for too long and called Zachary to update him on the situation. Zachary sounded anxious and requested Callum to ensure Serenity didn't leave. He was unable to call for additional help since his other family members were too far away. With the support of Callum, Josh, and Duncan, Serenity remained near the office building. In the meantime, Zachary's convoy arrived just as Serenity was about to get into her car. Seeing the Rolls-Royce, Serenity recalled similar cars in Brenfield and questioned Zachary about it. He continued to lie, claiming it belonged to a fellow resident. Among Zachary's security team, Serenity noticed a familiar face, Jim, who was supposed to be a hired driver. However, she realized that Jim was Zachary's personal bodyguard and not just an ordinary employee. The revelation added to Serenity's growing anger and confusion about Zachary's identity and actions. Serenity's heart sank as she noticed Zachary's luxurious car, wondering if he had intentionally bought it to deceive her. She speculated that he paraded around in such an expensive car with his security detail to match the image of the wealthy York heir. Zachary approached the sisters and apologized, requesting a moment alone with Serenity. Serenity coldly dismissed the idea, feeling inferior and unworthy of talking to someone like Mr. York. In a fit of rage, Serenity lashed out at Zachary, but he patiently endured her outburst and held her tightly. He had expected this reaction and was afraid of facing the truth, but after speaking with Ben, he mustered the courage to be honest. Despite Serenity's attempts to break free and her biting, Zachary refused to let go, knowing that she might walk away if he did. He repeatedly apologized for keeping the truth from her for so long. Exhausted from her emotional outburst, Serenity finally gave up and allowed Zachary to carry her to his Rolls-Royce. As they drove off with the convoy, Zachary instructed the driver to take them to their villa on the hilltop. Recalling Zachary's previous lie about the villa's mortgage, Serenity felt disillusioned with every memory of him. She wondered if he had ever spoken a truthful word to her. In the car, Zachary held onto Serenity, desperate for her to look at him, but she refused. The revelation of his identity shattered the affection they once had, leaving their relationship in turmoil. The question remained whether they could ever regain what they had lost. Upon arriving back at the hilltop villa, Zachary attempted to carry Serenity, but she adamantly refused and pushed him away. Her anger towards him was evident as she coldly dismissed the title of Mrs. York and accused him of being a natural liar, skilled at deception. She regretted underestimating his true identity and felt like a fool for not seeing through his act. Serenity recalled how she had once scoffed at the idea of marrying a wealthy man like Zachary and believed the York family was beyond her reach. Now, she realized her mistake and couldn't believe she had been living in the dark about his true identity. Zachary remained silent and contemplated his lies as Serenity entered the villa on her own. Brent expressed concern about Serenity's reaction and suggested calling old Mrs. York for assistance, but Zachary thought it might make things worse. He knew that Grandma May was instrumental in bringing them together and kept his identity concealed from Serenity initially. In the villa, Serenity sat on the sofa, feeling a mix of anger and hunger. Despite her rage, she realized she was hungry and decided not to let Zachary's actions affect her eating habits. She went to find some food, determined not to let him have that control over her. Meanwhile, Jim and the others discussed the situation with concern for Zachary, knowing he had to face Serenity's anger and hoping that she wouldn't mention divorce, which would greatly distress him. Serenity stood up and headed into the kitchen. As Zachary entered from outside, he caught a glimpse of Serenity in the kitchen. He remained silent, unsure how to approach her after the confrontation. In the kitchen, Serenity prepared a simple plate of spaghetti for herself. When she saw Zachary, she glanced at him briefly but ignored his presence, focusing on her meal instead. Zachary was concerned that her anger might make her refuse to eat, but to his surprise, she had a healthy appetite and enjoyed the spaghetti. Zachary decided to approach her cautiously and sat down at the dining table, attempting to address her. However, she quickly cut him off, telling him not to affect her appetite. Feeling guilty, he accepted her demand and remained quiet while she finished her meal. After finishing her food, Serenity stood up with the plate, intending to wash it herself. Zachary immediately offered to help, trying to make amends. Serenity didn't refuse his offer and allowed him to wash the dishes while she went back to the living room. Ensuring that she wouldn't leave, Zachary worked quickly to clean the dishes and cut some fruits, placing them in a bowl to offer to Serenity. He hesitated but ultimately brought the bowl to her, calling her honey out of habit. She snapped at him not to use that term, so he corrected himself and called her Saren instead. However, she declined the fruits, stating that she was still full from her earlier anger. Zachary felt dejected, his neck and body still bearing the marks of her anger. He sincerely apologized for lying to her for more than 4 months. Zachary explained that his Nana forced him into the marriage because she liked Serenity and wanted her as a granddaughter-in-law. He mistakenly believed Serenity had orchestrated the marriage to gain access to their family's wealth and status. He admitted to being guarded against her at first, assuming she was after his money. He confessed that his sensitive identity as the heir to the wealthy York family and head of York Corporation led him to doubt her intentions. He didn't deny that he lacked feelings for her initially and couldn't fully comprehend her side of the story. "I had no idea you were from a rich family. Why would I want anything from you? When we had our first argument, I already explained my motives. I noticed you had a house for us to live in, so I wouldn't have to rent one. I saw you were responsible, with a stable job, which would satisfy and reassure my sister." Zachary spoke with bitterness, acknowledging his mistakes. "Saren, I know you married me to ease your sister's worries, not because you wanted my money or me. I misunderstood, and I'm sorry. You can hit me or scold me if that's what you need. I should be punished for what I've done. You can punish me however you see fit." Serenity glared at him, not accepting his apologies. She explained, "Initially, I hid my identity to test your character. Nana insisted I marry you, but I wanted to know if you were someone I could spend my life with. That's why I lived with you anonymously. With time, I realized you're a good person, and I fell in love with you." Zachary tried to reach for Serenity's hand, but she rejected him vehemently. Despite this, he refused to give up and expressed his fear of losing her after revealing the truth. He kissed her hand gently, showing tenderness and guilt in his eyes. Serenity withdrew her hand, expressing her frustration and disappointment in him for lying to her for over 4 months. She accused him of cheating and misleading her until now. Zachary tried to explain his fear of losing her, but Serenity didn't want to hear it. She stood up, needing time to calm down and consider the future of their marriage. She wanted to go home, to a place with only her sister and Sonny, where she could mend her heart that had been wounded by Zachary's actions. Zachary chased after her, growling and demanding she not consider divorce. Serenity ignored his words and kept her resolve to end the marriage, feeling that they were not well suited for each other. When Zachary attempted to restrain her, Serenity retaliated, slapping and kicking him in her fury. She refused to be stopped, determined to leave and find clarity. "Saren, if you need to calm down, you can do so in our house. I won't say anything, I'll just sit next to you and watch quietly, but you can't leave." Zachary pleaded, clinging to hope that their marriage could be saved. Zachary couldn't shake the feeling that if he allowed Serenity to leave the villa, he might not have a chance to see her again. He knew her temperament well. "Let me go, Zachary York. I don't want to talk to you right now. I don't even want to look at you." Serenity fiercely resisted, even biting the back of his hand, but he refused to let go. She unleashed punches and kicks in her agitation. Finally, Zachary resorted to knocking her out with a rabbit punch, then carried her upstairs to bed. As he sat by her side, he reflected on the gravity of her anger and the violence she displayed. Holding her hand, Zachary kissed it tenderly and apologized for his lies. He declared that he wouldn't divorce her and showered her face with countless butterfly kisses. Suddenly, his phone rang, and it was Nana calling. He answered reluctantly. Nana asked about Serenity's fury and advised him to let her have her space and not argue with her. Zachary reminded Nana that she had lied to Serenity as well. Nana acknowledged her mistake but stressed that Zachary's deception hurt Serenity even more because he was her husband. She advised him to apologize and communicate with her after giving her time to calm down. Zachary then revealed that Serenity had expressed her desire to leave him and consider whether their marriage should continue. Nana's heart sank upon hearing this, realizing the severity of the situation and how deeply Zachary feared losing Serenity. "Don't panic, Zach. I'll head over there right away. Where are you?" Grandma May soothed Zachary's emotions over the phone. She knew she played a part in the current situation between the couple. Zachary's tone softened after venting his frustrations. He expressed that Nana's presence wouldn't help as they all lied to Saren, and seeing any of them would remind her of the months of deception. Grandma May advised him to find a way to coax Saren and give her some time to calm down if needed. Zachary insisted he wouldn't let her out of his sight, displaying his domineering character. After hanging up, Grandma May silently prayed for her grandson's reconciliation with Serenity, knowing his bad temper wouldn't make it easy. Zachary then called Jim, instructing him to send all the Valentine's Day gifts he prepared for Saren to his room and to decorate the yard with roses. The bodyguards had been worried about the couple's fighting since the internet broadcast of Zachary's interview. When the bodyguards brought the gifts to Zachary's room, they were surprised to find Serenity lying motionless on the bed. Assuming she either fainted from anger or Zachary knocked her unconscious, they realized the situation was more complicated than they thought. Leaving the gifts, they retreated from the room, and just 2 minutes later, Serenity woke up, remembering the events before she lost consciousness, which reignited her fury towards Zachary. "Saren," Zachary anxiously called out as she looked at him in silence. He wondered if he had used too much force, if he had hurt her. Serenity snapped back to her senses and unleashed her fury upon him. Pouncing him like a ferocious lion, she grabbed his collar and hit the back of his neck, screaming in anger at being knocked out. Zachary did his best to calm her down, embracing her tightly to prevent her from leaving. He apologized for knocking her out, confessing that he didn't know how else to make her stay. He promised he would never lie to her again, begging her not to leave him. Serenity, however, refused to believe his promises, feeling betrayed by the lies he told. She accused him of causing her pain and said she couldn't trust anything he said. She even threatened to go to Sean, her love rival, and leave Zachary. Upon hearing that, Zachary growled in fear, knowing how much he feared losing her to Sean. He made a hasty, unwise remark about locking her in the house and confiscating her communication devices to prevent her from contacting Sean. Realizing his mistake, Zachary regretted his words. He was often sharp and decisive in business matters, but when it came to emotions, he struggled. Serenity saw through his commanding demeanor, pointing out that he was the center of attention in the York family and that everything revolved around him, both at home and in the company. She felt suffocated by his dominance and accused him of using threats and bossing her around. Serenity questioned whether this was the real him, the heir of the York family, always at the center of the world, where his words were treated as law by his brothers and in the company. This is your true personality. You're always self-centered and lord over everything. You're overbearing, arrogant, egotistical, and even paranoid. Serenity's words dripped with mockery as she confronted Zachary about his character. She pointed out that his behavior was the same at the beginning of their marriage, and even when he pretended to be an ordinary person, his dominant traits couldn't be hidden. While their feelings had warmed up over time, his overbearing nature seemed to resurface now, Serenity felt suffocated in the presence of a Zachary York like this. As an independent woman, conflicts with him only escalated, making it harder for them to communicate. Zachary desperately wanted to calm her down but kept making mistakes that only fueled her anger. Serenity had lost trust in him completely. She questioned whether he saw her as family, considering how he had kept so many things from her and lied for so long. In an attempt to reassure her, Zachary spoke of driving Sean out of Wilkes-Barre so he couldn't see her again, but this revelation only made Serenity feel more deceived. Though Zachary pleaded and made promises, Serenity's eyes showed no signs of believing him anymore. She pushed him away, wanting to leave, but he clung to her, vowing never to divorce her. Despite his gifts and professions of love, Serenity couldn't bring herself to accept them. The gifts didn't matter to her now, she wanted honesty and trust. She warned him not to knock her out again, threatening to cut ties if he dared. Zachary was genuinely afraid of hurting her again and let her go, feeling distressed and remorseful for her pain. Serenity walked out of the room, and Zachary silently followed her, staying close behind every step. Downstairs, outside the villa's gate, she attempted to open the side gate, but it was locked. When she turned to demand the keys from Zachary, he surprised her by flinging the keys far beyond the gate, claiming he didn't have them. Frustrated, Serenity looked to the bodyguards and servants for help, but they all denied having the keys. She realized that as long as Zachary refused to let her leave, they wouldn't intervene either. Examining the high walls surrounding the villa, Serenity knew it would be difficult to climb over them. She searched for a ladder and found one in the greenhouse. As she was about to use it, Zachary intervened, taking the ladder away and preventing her escape. Serenity was furious with Zachary's behavior, feeling like he was putting her under house arrest and not allowing her the space to calm down and have a proper conversation. Enraged and filled with hatred, Serenity retreated into a guest room and locked herself inside. She wanted to seek help from her sister or best friend but realized her phone's battery had run out. Meanwhile, Zachary was also seeking help and turned to Josh. He asked for advice on how to handle the situation with Serenity, who was furious and uncooperative. Zachary feared that Serenity would leave him, and he expressed his concerns to Josh, stating that he would not allow her to be with Sean if she left him. Josh and Jasmine listened to Zachary's desperate plea, and Jasmine even took the phone to offer some advice. She suggested that Zachary let Serenity come back and confide with her sister to calm down. Jasmine assured him that Serenity was not the type to run away from problems and that she would deal with the situation honestly. Zachary, however, was filled with panic and expressed his fear of letting Serenity leave the villa. He was worried that if she left, he wouldn't be able to find her again. He felt desperate to keep her close to him and prevent her from leaving. The situation remained tense, and both Zachary and Serenity were struggling to find a resolution to their conflict. Jasmine reassured Zachary that she knew Serenity well and was confident that she wouldn't secretly run away. However, Zachary remained stubborn, refusing to trust her assurance. Josh comforted Jasmine, explaining that Zachary was acting irrationally due to the unfamiliar emotional turmoil he was facing. Josh took the phone back and asked about Serenity's condition, concerned about what Zachary might have done to her. Zachary explained that he had locked the gate and thrown away the keys to prevent her from leaving, which had only angered her further. Zachary was feeling lost and overwhelmed, as he had never experienced such helplessness before. He felt deeply in love with Serenity and feared losing her, which had prolonged the deceit for so long. Josh and Jasmine advised him to let Serenity come back to calm down and confide in her sister and friends. Jasmine, however, emphasized that she wouldn't pressure Serenity into any decision, as it was her life, and she should make the choice for herself. Zachary couldn't bring himself to let Serenity go, fearing she would leave him without a word. He worried that she might seek the help of her sister and friends to hide from him. Josh encouraged him to calm down and find a way to regain Serenity's trust and ease her anger. Feeling frustrated, Zachary expressed that he didn't know what to do to soothe Serenity's anger, and everything he did seemed to make matters worse. He even mentioned having to knock her unconscious to make her stay, which shocked Josh and highlighted Zachary's lack of emotional handling skills. The situation remained tense, and Zachary's emotional state was causing concern among his friends, who hoped he could find a way to make amends with Serenity. Josh told Zachary to calm down and not do anything to hurt Serenity again, promising to call back once he thought of a solution. He ended the call before exploding in anger and maintained his composure in front of Jasmine, determined to be sincere with her, unlike Zachary's behavior with Serenity. Both Josh and Jasmine agreed that it might take months for Serenity and Zachary to make up, and Jasmine believed that Serenity would bring up the topic of divorce. Josh then humorously urged Jasmine to persuade Serenity not to divorce Zachary, joking that his life depended on it. Jasmine playfully scolded him, asserting her belief in her own good fortune. She mentioned that she needed to examine Josh further before agreeing to be his girlfriend and that he would have to prove his sincerity. Josh defended Zachary, stating that he was more sincere than him and that their situations were different. While Zachary concealed his identity out of fear of losing Serenity, he later decided to reveal the truth but was conflicted about it. Jasmine pointed out that Zachary's decision to reveal his identity after falling in love with Serenity was what made her angry. He became bolder because he believed they were a real couple now. Josh shared that Zachary sought advice from Remy after attending a wedding in Annenberg, which led him to consider coming clean about his identity. He's not unafraid of losing her, instead, he has chosen to confront the consequences of his deception. He gathered the courage to face reality, but now, he's overwhelmed with fear and has made yet another mistake, Jasmine sighed. We can empathize, but we can never truly experience Saren's hurt and anger. In any case, I won't offer her any advice. Even if I wanted to, it wouldn't be appropriate now. She's been wronged, so why should I help him? Encouraging her to forgive him then letting her vent her anger would only make her feel more aggrieved. If I could, I'd beat Zachary up on her behalf. I wonder if Mr. Stone knows. He's her cousin, maybe he could intervene and give Zachary a piece of his mind. That would be a relief to see, Jasmine added, her thoughts filled with concern. Josh was left speechless. Zachary had indeed managed to upset a lot of people. Oh, Elisa. She's supposed to be back in 2 days. As soon as she finds out, she might do something unpredictable. She used to have feelings for him. I can't help but worry about how she'll react, Jasmine said, rubbing her temples. This situation feels like something out of a novel. It's astonishing how fiction imitates reality, Josh commented. Which novel is that? How did the male lead eventually win the female lead's forgiveness? Maybe Zachary could learn something from it, Josh inquired. Jasmine replied, it's a serialized novel, so the author hasn't written that far yet. I have no idea how the female lead forgave the male lead. Josh looked at her, speechless. Don't look at me like that. I'm not the author, I can't provide the answer just by looking at my face. If you really want to help Zachary, follow my advice and suggest he give Saren her freedom. He shouldn't imprison her in his villa, even if they're husband and wife. He doesn't have the right to restrict her freedom. Josh responded wryly, you heard what Zachary said earlier. Do you think he'll listen to my advice now? Didn't you see that I hung up on him because I was so angry? He believes that letting Serenity go is equivalent to losing her. He won't listen to anyone at this point. I guess we just have to let him be and hope he learns from the consequences of his actions." Jasmine fell silent for a moment before deciding to get some food. "I'm getting food. I'm hungry since I didn't have lunch." Josh realized that he hadn't eaten either due to the situation with Zachary and Serenity. "Don't rely on snacks. I'll order food delivery," he said as he called the Wiltspoon Hotel to place the order. In the meantime, Serenity, who locked herself in the guest room, found a pen and paper and began writing a divorce agreement. Since they hadn't acquired any additional property during their marriage, there were no assets to divide. Zachary had once promised to leave her the house in Brimfield and the national MPV if they divorced, but Serenity wanted none of it. She had no desire to keep anything obtained through his deceitful actions. The car she currently drove was purchased with Zachary's money, and she planned to repay him in full after the divorce. Serenity didn't wish to claim any of his assets or seek compensation for anything. They would each keep what belonged to them, and she only needed him to sign the agreement. There was a knock on the door, and Zachary called out to Serenity, urging her to open the door. However, Serenity remained silent, refusing to engage with him. He tried various tactics, appealing to her with the beauty of the yard, offering her favorite dishes, and even saying he wouldn't eat until she came out. But Serenity was not swayed and yelled at him, calling him a liar. Feeling choked and hurt, Zachary finally left the door and instructed the maids to persuade Serenity to come out. He even threatened to fire them if they failed. The maids then went upstairs and persuaded Serenity to open the door, emphasizing Zachary's worry and hunger. Serenity finally unlocked the door and faced the maids. She insisted on not being called Mrs. anymore, as she wouldn't be Zachary's wife for much longer. When asked about Zachary, she expressed her anger and disappointment in how he had treated her with suspicion and mistrust, making her feel like a thief. In the past, Serenity didn't care about Zachary's deception because she wasn't in love with him. However, now that she had fallen for him, the truth about his lies caused her immense pain. Thinking about their recent time together and his affectionate gestures only intensified her anger and hurt. She wondered if his adoration was also part of his deceit. Her neck still hurt from his rough grab earlier. She couldn't believe how much of a jerk Zachary York was. The maids present were aware of Zachary's deception from the beginning but kept silent. When Serenity asked for a charger, they suggested she borrow one from Zachary, knowing well that she couldn't charge her phone without his consent. Descending the stairs with a divorce agreement in hand, Serenity saw Zachary on the sofa, seemingly texting someone. As she approached, he hastily put away his phone and greeted her. She coldly reminded him not to call her honey. She then placed the divorce agreement on the coffee table and asked him to sign it. However, Zachary's reaction was explosive. He tore the paper without even looking at it, declaring that he wouldn't divorce her and insisting they would be together forever, even in death. His possessiveness only fueled Serenity's anger, and she found it futile to communicate with him. She turned to leave, but Zachary forcibly pulled her back into his arms, apologized, and kissed her. However, Serenity was unwilling to listen to his apologies and pulled away, not wanting to engage with him any further. His actions only intensified her determination to leave him. She couldn't bear to be with someone who had deceived her so deeply and continued to act possessive and unreasonable. In her anger, Serenity pushed Zachary away forcefully when he continued his advances. Frustrated and hurt, she couldn't bear his behavior any longer and swung her hand, delivering a resounding slap. The unexpected act shocked Brent and the maids, who had never witnessed such a scene in the York household, known for loving and harmonious marriages. Feeling guilty and remorseful, Zachary blamed himself for causing Serenity even more pain and anger. He had hoped that his warmth would soothe her, but it seemed to have the opposite effect. Brant, realizing the seriousness of the situation, immediately contacted Sam, the butler, seeking assistance in handling the escalating tension. Serenity turned away, refusing to meet Zachary's gaze, but tears welled up in her eyes. Despite her anger, she couldn't help but be affected by the whole situation. Zachary gently inquired if her hand hurt, trying to show concern for her, but she pulled her hand away, requesting him to give her some dignity. Feeling overwhelmed by their emotions and the messy situation, Serenity asked Zachary to let her leave for a while so they could both cool down. She pleaded with him not to hold her under house arrest, which would only worsen their situation. She pointed out his overbearing and self-centered behavior, noting that if their roles were reversed, he would also be furious and hurt if deceived for months. Zachary, however, insisted that divorce was not an option for him. He acknowledged his deception and admitted he wasn't right in hiding the truth, but he couldn't bear the idea of losing her. Despite his plea, Serenity expressed her frustration, wanting to end the marriage because she felt deceived and suffocated by his domineering and paranoid nature. As the tension hung heavy in the hall, Serenity finally requested Zachary's phone charger since her phone was out of battery. Zachary hesitated, realizing that without her phone, Serenity would be unable to contact anyone outside, giving him more control over her. But he also knew this was not the real solution to their problems. The silence in the room highlighted the intensity of their emotions and the complexity of their relationship. The atmosphere in the room was tense. Brant and the maids were afraid to make any move or sound. After a prolonged silence, Zachary finally instructed Brant to fetch his phone charger for Serenity. Brant complied promptly, but he couldn't help wondering if this act meant Zachary was allowing her to leave. However, he didn't dare express such thoughts, as he knew how important Serenity was to Zachary and feared she might never return if given the chance to leave. When Brant brought the charger, Zachary gave it to Serenity, pleading her not to bring up divorce again. However, Serenity remained distant and only took the charger without giving him any assurance. Zachary couldn't comprehend why she would want to divorce him now that she knew his true identity as a multi-billionaire. His inability to understand the depth of her anger and hurt blinded him to his own mistakes. Zachary's actions only fueled Serenity's anger further. He tried to explain himself, but his forceful approach and imprisonment-like behavior made her uncomfortable and resentful. She couldn't forgive him easily, and his attempts to reconcile felt insincere to her. As Serenity tried to avoid him, Zachary followed her, hoping to bridge the gap between them. However, her coldness and detachment wounded him deeply. Despite her hunger, Serenity chose not to resort to a hunger strike as a means to pressure Zachary. She knew it wouldn't work on him, and she didn't want to torture herself in the process. In the dining hall, Serenity began to eat with a spoon, disregarding the tension in the room. Brant and the maids were relieved that she didn't resort to a hunger strike, knowing it would only escalate the conflict. For the time being, they hoped this would prevent further intensification of the situation. Zachary felt a sense of relief as well. After a brief silence, he decided to sit across from Serenity in the dining hall. He tried to show his affection by placing food on her plate with his fork, but she avoided his gesture, refusing to accept his offerings. Disheartened, he put the food back on his own plate. Undeterred, Zachary continued to offer her favorite food and even attempted to help her peel shrimp. However, Serenity ignored his attempts and ate on her own without acknowledging him. Zachary was disheartened by her coldness, feeling that his efforts were in vain. The doorbell rang unexpectedly, and Brant went to answer it. To their surprise, it was Liberty, Serenity's older sister, who had been worried after not being able to reach her sister due to the dead phone battery. Mrs. Lane, a friend of the family, had accompanied Liberty. Liberty had driven Serenity's car back home after finding it at York Corporation. Brand updated Liberty on the situation, expressing how Zachary was on the verge of breaking down, and the atmosphere between the couple was chaotic. Liberty understood the gravity of the situation, and after parking the car, she entered the villa. Brant respectfully greeted Liberty, and Mrs. Lane led the way into the opulent villa's lounge. Serenity was taken aback when she saw Liberty entering the room. She immediately set her plate aside and approached Liberty. However, Zachary instinctively reached out and grabbed her wrist. Serenity glared at him coldly, causing him to release her hand. Their relationship had returned to its icy state from their first night together, or perhaps even colder than that. He let Serenity go and allowed her to walk towards her sister. Upon meeting, Serenity broke down in her sister's arms, releasing all her pent-up emotions through tears. Liberty comforted her and let her cry for as long as she needed. Meanwhile, Zachary watched from a distance, feeling the pain of witnessing his wife's tears, knowing he was the reason for her sorrow. The sisters sat together while Zachary sat opposite them. Liberty stated that she came to take Serenity home with her, to which Zachary responded that this was Serenity's home and she was his wife. Liberty expressed her concern about the escalating conflict and suggested taking Serenity back for a while, but Zachary firmly refused, fearing that Serenity would not return if she left. This infuriated Liberty. Serenity, on the other hand, had lost her previous anger and agitation, appearing indifferent and resigned. She asked her sister to leave and assured her that she'll be fine. Liberty knew that Zachary would not easily change his mind, so she proposed a private conversation. The two went outside to talk. Liberty saw that Zachary was physically and mentally exhausted, but she had little sympathy for him, believing that they must face the consequences of their decisions as adults. "I don't want to lose Saren, Liberty. I don't want a divorce," Zachary confessed, feeling genuinely scared of the possibility of Serenity leaving him. Liberty responded with a dose of reality, explaining that Serenity was not the type to run away from problems, even if she asked for a divorce. She emphasized that forcing her to stay wouldn't solve the issue and that he needed to consider her feelings. She compared his behavior to holding sand tightly, which only made it slip away faster. After giving her advice, Liberty went back inside, leaving Zachary standing there with a cold and tense expression. He thought about what she said, but his fear of losing Serenity still held him back. Serenity said her goodbyes to her sister and watched Liberty drive away. She then returned to the villa, and instead of going inside, she aimlessly wandered around the courtyard. Zachary followed her, but there was a noticeable distance and lack of communication between them. As they drifted apart emotionally, Serenity's mood matched the gloomy night, and the cold wind mirrored the chill between the couple. Meanwhile, at Liberty's place, Sonny woke up and felt distressed without his mother. Duncan tried to comfort him, but the little boy was longing for his mommy's presence. Sonny refused Duncan's attempts to comfort him and cried even harder as he searched the house for his mother, Liberty. Duncan tried offering candy, a windmill, and his phone to distract Sonny, but nothing seemed to work. He felt a bit helpless, not knowing how to soothe children. As Liberty approached the house, she heard her son's cries and rushed inside. Sonny ran to her, and she immediately comforted him, wiping away his tears and snot. She explained that she had gone out for some business and assured him that she still loved him. Duncan felt a bit embarrassed about his failed attempts to comfort Sonny and apologized to Liberty. He admitted that he had little experience with children. Liberty explained that Sonny always cried if he woke up and didn't see her around. She mentioned that even his father, Hank, had a hard time soothing him, as Hank rarely spent time with their son. Liberty couldn't help but think about Jessica's recent marriage with Hank and found it amusing that Jessica might believe it would affect her.